In this video, I'm going to take you on a little woodworking journey and show you my preferred method for breaking down shipping pallets in order to reclaim the lumber from those pallets and make them into something beautiful in the wood shop. To break down pallets in the way you're going to see here, you're going to need these tools: a circular saw, framing hammer, a pallet busting tool, a reciprocating saw with a metal cutting blade, a steel punch, and a pair of linesman's pliers to help pull out nails. Start by laying the pallet you want to break down flat on the ground, and then cut off all the ends of the boards with your circular saw. I find this method, although it wastes a couple inches of wood, is just so much faster and easier than trying to pry off the ends of the boards. And most of the time when you try to pry, in my experience, the boards just splinter anyway. So to me, it's worth the sacrifice of a couple inches of wood to make the job so much easier and to end up with better results as well. It's one thing if you have a brand new pallet that doesn't have any splits or warps in it, but most pallets are not like that, so you're going to want to use this cutting method. After that, the boards are only joined to the middle joist, so a lot of them can just wiggle free from the nails by hand, as you see I'm doing here. If you find one that does not wiggle free so easily, as some of them will not, especially with hardwood pallets, you want to grab the pallet busting tool and use the leverage of that tool to your advantage to lever the boards off of that central joist, popping the nails out as you do. As you use the pallet busting tool to lever the boards off of the central joist, you'll find most of the time the nails securing the boards come out with the boards, but sometimes those nails are driven particularly deep, and the board will actually pop off of the nails and leave the nails embedded in the central joist. Whichever one of these happens to you as you break down your pallet, I'll be showing you how to deal with each situation later in the video. Once you've got all the boards removed, use your framing hammer to knock loose the short offcuts from the ends of the boards off of the two outer joists of the pallet. Most of the time these fragments of board are so small that they're easy to split and knock off with just a few hits of your hammer. Sometimes though you'll run into a stubborn one, and there's a different way for handling those. In practice I find about 90% of these offcuts bash off just fine with the hammer. When you do run into offcut ends that are too stubborn to come off with some hits from your hammer, you can use your reciprocating saw with its metal cutting blade to make quick work of some of the nails holding down those stubborn board ends. It doesn't usually require cutting all the nails. I find just cutting one or two is enough to loosen up the remaining fragments, and then you can go to work with your hammer again and bash those pieces off. With all the board ends bashed off of the joists, it's now time to pull out some nails. On this particular pallet, you can see that a lot of the nails remained embedded in the joists rather than coming off with the boards. So you can use the claws on your framing hammer to lever these out. Be careful though, as you can see here, I'm having some difficulty. The heads of the nails sometimes tend to bend and break, making the hammer fairly useless for getting them off, and that's where your pair of linesman pliers can help. Just experiment with different angles and different motions of the pliers to twist and lever any stubborn nails out of the wood. It'll take some doing, but you want to put in the time to get this done right. You don't want to leave any nails embedded in the wood, especially if you're going to be turning this pallet wood into fine furniture or something, because any nails that are left in the wood could really hurt your woodworking tools like your power planer, jointer, table saw, things like that. You don't want any nails left in this wood at all, if you can help it. That said, sometimes you can't help it. Sometimes the nail will actually break off as you're pulling it out, leaving just a little bit sticking up. And that's where your reciprocating saw comes in again. Cut the nail off flush to begin with, as you see I've done here. Now that on its own isn't enough though, because this could still hurt your woodworking tools later. So use your steel punch and a hammer to actually pound the cut off piece of nail deeply down into the wood to get it out of the way of the planer blade, jointer blade, and whatever other woodworking tools you may use on this wood later. I like to make sure any off-cut nails left in the wood are pounded down at least 1/4 to 1/2 inch into the wood to make sure I have plenty of room to plane the wood smooth without the blades of my tools encountering these pieces of nail. Continue levering the nails out of the joists, making sure, once again, that you don't miss any and leave any embedded in the wood. When I'm getting rid of nails, I like to use a can from my recycling bin to just keep them all. It's really important not to forget about this and leave nails lying around, because obviously they're a safety hazard. They're unsafe for people walking around, for pets, for car tires. So you really want to go the extra mile and make sure that all of your nails are contained and accounted for as you do this pallet breakdown work. Now it's time to flip your pallet over and repeat all of the processes that we just did on the other side, the bottom side of the pallet. Usually the bottom side has considerably fewer boards spanning the joists than the top side does, so this should go a little quicker. Once again, you start with your circular saw, lining it up with the inside face of the pallet joists, and cutting those boards off to prevent you struggling to lever and pry them off and probably damaging them in the process. Next, use your pallet breakdown tool once again to pry the boards off the central joists. It's a little trickier this time because the whole thing is going to wobble now that it's mostly taken apart. So use your body weight, as you see I'm doing here. Step on the central joist to lever things off. Sometimes the central joist will actually break and split, as you see has happened here. That's just a product of the fact that a lot of pallets are in pretty poor condition, and although most of the wood is salvageable, not all of it will be. That's just the harsh reality of dealing with pallets and getting wood from pallets. Most of these things have been through the ringer, especially if you're getting them for free from some local business. So there's no sense worrying about things breaking like this. You can see here the other end of this central joist is splitting as well. So what that means is I'm going to end up with slightly less wood than I might have. I won't get to use that central joist in any furniture that I make from these pallets, but that's okay. You have to be willing to cut your losses when it comes to pallet breakdown work. After all, the wood is free. If this sort of thing happens to you, just bash off the broken pieces of joist with a hammer, as you see I'm doing here. Should just take a few hits before the nails will start to let go and loosen up, and then you can just pull off the wood by hand, or just keep hitting until your hammer has done all of it for you. Next, you once again want to bash off the short offcuts of board left on the outer joists. And this shouldn't take you very long at all because, as I mentioned earlier, there's going to be fewer boards on the bottom of the pallet than on the top, so there's going to be fewer offcuts. With all the offcuts removed, you can go ahead and pull all the nails out of the bottom of the joists with your framing hammer and with your linesman pliers if need be. I really like this hammer made by Stiletto because it's got this side nail puller thing on the side of the head of the hammer, which actually works a lot better than the claws. So that's why I'm using my hammer sideways like this. If you have a hammer with a feature like this, it pays to bring it to this job because it'll make a big difference. Once all the nails are pulled out of the joists, you can get the boards that you have removed from the joists, many of which will have nails remaining in the central area. Straighten the nails with your hammer, and then one at a time, pound them out backwards from the boards, and then flip the boards over and pry them the rest of the way out, and then deposit them in your nail can. As you work, double check each board and joist that you process, making sure you haven't forgotten any nails. When you're sure you haven't, you can pile them to one side, and then bring them into a warm, heated space when you're done, so that the wood can dry. Thanks very much for watching this video on my method for breaking down shipping pallets to reclaim that wood and make something beautiful. I hope you enjoyed it. There's going to be upcoming videos showing the kinds of projects I personally do with the reclaimed lumber from these pallets, so stay tuned for that. If you enjoyed the video, drop it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel for lots more great content.